What up, everybody? You're listening to Quetzal Talk. This is Daniel and Luis here, and we got a special guest, Josh Meier from the Canutillo Bee Ranch, and also, are you the president right now of the Paseo del Norte Bee Club?
I am. I'm the president of the Paseo del Norte Beekeepers Association. In addition to that, yeah.
Hell yeah! Thank you for being on the show, man.
You're welcome.
Great to have you here.
Yeah. Hey, man, I want to let you know. I used to garden a lot in my parents' backyard because they have land, and I would go out there every morning, man, to pluck out the weeds and water because I would plant cantaloupe and strawberries, tomatoes. What else did we do?
We did okra that year too.
Okra, and like that filled with bees, bro. In the morning while I was working there, not one ever stung me, man.
Yeah.
Not one. And I was scared. I was really scared, but I'm like, dude, this has to get done, because I wouldn't want to do it when the sun was out or at the end of the day because I would be tired. So yeah, I was pretty amazed, man. Why do you think they don't sting people like that?
Well, generally bees aren't naturally aggressive, and we were talking about this before we started, that normally when a bee stings a mammal, it's actually the end of their life. So they're very cautious about that. But normally they're only defensive when they're trying to defend something, like you or I would be defending our children or somebody important to us that we love. So if you bump into their nest or where their colony is, then they're going to be more aggressive than just out foraging like in your garden.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was pretty amazing because it felt like we were all working together. Like we were all just workmates. Because, we were all just working, minding our own business. And if I needed to pluck or cut a leaf to where they were at, they would just move. Like
they do.
They don't, it was like they kind of knew what you were doing. And, like, hey. That's what I kind of got off of it. But it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, unfortunately, bees don't read books and they don't write books, so we don't really know what they're thinking. But I believe you, it did seem like they're working together with you.
Hey, they say actions speak louder than words.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, have you ever seen anything interesting that seemed like they were more than just stupid animals? Did you ever see?
Well, they're certainly they're very, very intelligent animals. Actually, as a super organism. But there are certain members of our club that have come, because occasionally when I do a removal, I don't have room for the new bees at my house, so I send them to a friend of mine, and the friend that picked them up accused me of giving him bees that didn't like him but loved me, because they were stinging him. They were a little bit aggressive and moving. That's not abnormal.
Right.
But I was just standing out there, and they were totally ignoring me, and they were going after him. So Maybe they really did know me. I don't know.
Yeah. Or do you think maybe certain people have like an aggression that they can sense, or maybe a fear that they can sense?
Potentially. We tell people if you have a bee buzzing around your head, don't swat at them. They seem to know when you intend to do them violence, and will return it. And so some of they have their whole life being insects, they work on pheromones. And so if you successfully swat a bee, guess what? That sends out a pheromone, and it'll bring more bees to you. So they may not make a conscious decision, but it's going to seem that way. Yeah.
Right. And I don't know where I heard this or read this or what, but supposedly bees dance to the direction where the food is at.
That's correct. Yeah, that's how they give their directions. So if they need to tell other foragers where to find more nectar or where they found a nice field full of flowers, they do have a pattern. And so people have figured it out. I can't watch the bee and figure out what directions it's giving.
Right.
But it is very, very frequent. When we find a big ball of bees hanging on a tree, you can see foragers coming, or scouts coming back in to tell them where they're suggesting that the swarm go to make their new home.
Right.
And it's very interesting to watch. Yeah.
That's crazy. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. And when you're like, what about? Do you know anything about the native bees? Like, does hosting like the European bees, does it impact the native bees at all?
It can. We're not sure exactly of the interaction between the two. It doesn't seem to affect their population. But the European honeybee generally is like we talked about, a superorganism. They can make a colony that may have as many as 80 to 100,000 bees in it. And most native pollinators exist in much smaller colonies, and they seem to coexist pretty well. But what they were brought here for, and what we're dependent upon, is actually commercial food production is pretty much dependent on the proliferation of the superorganism of the honeybee. And so while we could maintain food production at some level with native pollinators, we're kind of dependent on the feral colonies and the commercial colonies for the honeybee.
So the native pollinators, do they make honey as well?
Not generally. Yeah, no. There is one paper wasp that I'm aware of, and I believe it's called the Mexican honey wasp, that we can find in this area, that makes a paper nest like a yellow jacket, and they produce honey. But generally speaking, no, they don't, and they certainly don't store it up like the bees do, like the honeybee does. So it's very difficult to harvest that product if they do.
And when they say that bees are endangered, do they mean the honeybee and the native bees and all the bees, or just some type of bees?
Well, very specifically, it's actually the commercial producers, the guys that are doing, you may not be aware that this happens, but they have commercial pollination contracts. And so they'll take whole semi-truckloads of bees starting in California for the almond pollination in February, and then they follow the production of the food products across the country. And the guys that do that are experiencing substantial losses. Their bees have substantial health problems. Here in the desert in El Paso, the feral colonies, the bees that are living under your shed floor or in the tree or in the soffit of your house or all those other places, there are lots of those. And the feral bees seem to be surviving quite well. But it's the commercial bees that are suffering a lot right now from the colony collapse disorder.
Yeah, do you think that's because of the mating with the Africanized honeybees, or?
Actually, I think that the hybridization with Africanized bees is actually helping the population here. They have a resistance to a lot of parasites that plague honeybees. I think what is actually happening is that the commercial bees, because they go across the whole country and are in different fields, they're getting different pesticide residues and different issues, health issues, different parasites, those things, as they're going along across the country, that are not able to be dealt with. But actually, despite being slightly more aggressive, the feral bees are very, very healthy. They're extremely healthy. Yeah.
So is there a shortage of bees overall? Like, is there really a problem because we're not going to have no pollinators and whatnot, or is it just?
It's a real issue. I mean, as you know, probably from just popular lore out there, roughly 80% of our food somehow is dependent on honeybees, and there is a shortage in the commercial colonies, and they need to figure out how to do that, how to remedy that problem. But nobody actually understands exactly what colony collapse disorder is,
right.
So they're not sure how to deal with it. Yeah,
it's just so hard to make the right pesticide. I mean, I've heard they've been having a problem with this since. You do one thing and it messes up this other thing, and then you come and fix that thing, but then it messes up something else. It's like, how do we balance that out, man? Does anyone have any good ideas? Or
well, generally speaking, and this is what I do in my practice, but I don't necessarily suggest that people in our club do it, but I keep all feral bees. I don't requeen them to make them nicer. I just let them be mean for the most part.
Right.
I mean, they're not overly mean. They're not dangerous mean. But I think ultimately we have to allow natural selection to somehow take place rather than to artificially create colonies that do exactly what we want them to do, and then utilize those. rather than spending all of our time making bees that we can work in shorts and short sleeve shirts with no equipment on. We need to just assume we need to work with the natural propensity of the bee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
And feral bee, is that the local one, the native one, or is that what? Can you tell us a little bit about feral bees?
Yeah. So when we say feral bees,
Oh, sorry, ignorance, man.
Oh, that's okay. No, when we say feral bees, we're talking. It could be basically we're talking about European honeybees that are not under cultivation. In other words, they're not in a box. That I like I have in Canutillo, where I have little frames and I can pull them out and I see the baby bees and I put them back in and it's nice.
Right.
They're living on the wild on their own. They're reproducing on their own. Sometimes you'll hear them called survivor stock because they have genetics that allow them to exist without medication, without treatment, without observation. But they're the same species. They're the same species as the bees that we cultivate, and they've just made it out on their own.
Yeah,
So-
and you're involved with the capturing of the feral bees, right? Like
That's correct. We my primary beekeeping activity actually is live removal and relocation out of all sorts of locations. Yeah.
And they don't have a problem being relocated. Like once you put them inside a new box, like they're okay with
Sometimes they do. I mean, there's a percentage that just won't move. They want to go find their own spot, and so we do the best we can to safely and remove them alive and relocate them and cultivate those genetics. But certain feral bee colonies just won't do it. They just leave. So we save the bees and we save the people. So we got the bees out of their house, but the other half of that is they don't go where we want them to go all the time. I mean, they just don't.
Yeah. And when you said like the feral bees that they don't need medication and all that, the bees you cultivate, do they need all types of like medication and
commercially specifically we have to treat for the varroa destructor mite very frequently, and that will just destroy a box of bees, a colony of bees. And the reason I cultivate feral colonies without altering their genetics is because I don't have to do that. But most beekeepers are fairly dependent on regular mite treatments.
So when you say alter their genetics, like they actually like kind of CRISPR kind of thing, like they go in and change the gene code, or is it
No, it's selective breeding. We actually so when you buy a queen bee frequently from a producer, they actually do artificial insemination of the mated queen so that they know that they have gentle genetics. That are mated with that queen. So when they put her in there and she lays 3,000 eggs a day, 1,500 to 3,000 eggs a day, that she's laying eggs for nice bees. And so it's not genetic modification. They're not going in Jurassic Park style and splicing in frog genes into the bees or whatever. But they have selectively bred genetics, and that's what they use to produce the queens specifically.
Damn, man. And so what happens in that box, man? Why do y'all put them in there?
Mainly it's for inspection purposes. And traditionally, bees have been kept in baskets called skeps. They've been kept in clay pots.
Right.
They've been kept in all sorts of things, and you know, feral bees go everywhere and anywhere they can find a spot. But the reason we do it is so that we can assess what's going on with the colony. The Langstroth beehive allows us to remove the brood frame, and we can look and see if the queen is laying well. We can see if she is having trouble, or if there's not a queen at all in the colony, and if we need to remedy that problem.
Right.
It also allows us to harvest honey more easily because we can simply put those frames in an extractor and spin the honey out and reuse that material. So it's really for us. The bees don't care. The bees would move into a bucket on your porch, and they do. They moved into flower pots and whatever. That's for us. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you guys sell honey too? You guys collect honey, or you guys just use it for yourself?
I do sell honey.
Nice.
I'm out of honey at the moment. This has been a weird year, but we sold out last weekend. We have I say that we have a little bit of comb honey. I should have brought you guys some, but. So comb honey is how they ate it for thousands of years before we started extracting it, like the pharaohs in Egypt. When you see in the Bible, whatever, that they ate honeycomb, that's what they ate, the wax and everything, and it's very,
like you
very
eat
healthy.
the wax and everything?
Yeah.
So does that taste way better, or is it just
I don't know.
Different than honey?
It's got some extra nutritional components. So, like for allergies, it has a lot more of what we call the propolis in it. When the propolis is one of the most beneficial things for allergies. And so when we get a lot of calls for people that want raw local honey to help with their allergies, and I suggest that they at least try that because it just has some nutritional elements that aren't in extracted honey.
Does it lose its taste, or is it as good as regular?
No, it tastes good. It's a little bit weird for people that are used to buying their honey at Walmart or Albertsons or whatever, because Walmart does not sell comb honey generally.
Right.
So the mouth feels a little bit weird, if you you chew that wax and it becomes like bubble gum that you've chewed too long, but you really should consume it. So some people put it in hot tea or coffee or something too, and it melts the wax up. So.
And how much would that cost, like a little bottle of that?
Well, a comb honey, we sell it in a package. We're not licensed to sell by weight. The government, doesn't like us to sell by weight unless we have certified scales. But a package of about a pound is about $10 of that. And then we sell a 16-ounce jar of honey for about $10 also.
And so, like the normal honey, like I heard it has to be heated up before sold, or?
They actually just do that for the consumer. It's pasteurization is what they're doing, and just like everything, it alters the chemical structure of the product. That's also not just filtered, but not just strained. We strain our honey to get any little leaf or whatever out of it. But they filter it at a very high level. So actually you're just getting straight sugar when you buy a pasteurized honey product. There's no pollen or anything that left in it that's active for health benefits. So it's really just a sweetener. The raw honey maintains that product. So as long as you don't heat it over 115 degrees and you're not super filtering it like they do commercially, then it's actually a whole food product, and you can gain some health benefits from that.
Yeah, I heard you can even they could even be stored indefinitely. Like in Egypt, the tombs, they found some honey and they're able to.
Some things are like that, man. They found grains of wheat in the pyramids and of this ancient variety of wheat, and they were able to grow that. And honey's like that too. They can pull it out of a 3,000-year-old tomb and eat it. I'm not sure I want to volunteer for that job, but you go, man, and I'll take the honey out of my hives, and we'll call it good. I'll feel like a pharaoh.
And I also had another question about bees, because you talk about like how commercially they're trying to make the bees like less harmful to people and less but I heard in Mexico there's a stingless type of bee grown in like the Yucatan that the Mayan have been nesting for a long time. That's stingless. I hear it's endangered now, but I hear that
in Brazil also they have a stingless honeybee. Their colonies are much smaller. So if you watch a podcast or you watch a video of how they keep them, the boxes are the size of like the lunchbox coolers that you might take for a single person on a picnic or whatever, and so their production is limited. But yeah, really, so there's a lot of laws involved in importing livestock essentially, and so we are not able to import those here. Although I tell people, bees don't care where your state line gets drawn or your border is. They do not care. They'll come across. So maybe one day I'll be taking out stingless bees. I'll be the discoverer of the new El Paso stingless bees from Mexico. I don't know.
That'd be cool, man.
Yeah, but who knows?
Population.
Yeah, that's how we got them. That's how we have the Africanization. They actually were imported from Africa to Brazil into a facility, and they escaped. And back decades ago, they started moving north. So that's where they came from.
Yeah. And when you say like you ran out of that honey, how long does it take to make a new batch, or like how often would it take to make new products?
Yeah, so I mean, I can crack the whip on those bees, but they make the honey at the rate they want to make it. Mm-hmm. And it's been a difficult year. We had that polar vortex came through Texas this year, and it delayed a lot of our swarm season and a lot of the colony growth. But normally most beekeepers that are managing any hives for production, they harvest 2 or 3 times a year. So I didn't take any honey out left over from the winter because I was concerned for the bees.
Right.
but I'll probably take some out at the end of May, and then I'll take some more out probably in July or August, and then I may take some more out in the fall.
Okay.
But again, my primary bee activity is actually to try to remove bees and then distribute those to other members in our group so that they can manage them for honey. It's kind of a side thing for me to harvest for honey.
And how many people are in the group right now? Active members in the group, do you think?
We have, I think that we have a couple hundred members just in our Facebook group. So in our Facebook group, those are members of our club and also friends, people that are interested in saving the bees, but aren't really interested in keeping their own bees or coming with me on a live removal or anything, but they try to facilitate that. And so we have several dozen members that are actively keeping substantial numbers of bees. And once or twice a year, our former president does a new beekeeper class to try to teach more people how to keep bees themselves.
That's awesome.
And is there any regulation on pesticides and trying to fix this whole bee problem that you know of?
Yeah, there is, especially in rural agricultural areas. One of the big problems that we have in many areas is actually like crop dusting. And so southern New Mexico, Doña Ana County produces so much of the food for New Mexico that they have pretty substantial regulations. And so you can post your apiary site, and supposedly that's supposed to keep your bees from getting sprayed. Unfortunately, within like the city limits where it's not an agricultural area, your neighbor can spray whatever he wants in his backyard, and unfortunately that can have adverse effects on your bees.
Right. And I know NMSU has like a pesticide program that they. Do you guys work with them at all? Or?
We really haven't, although we do have some members that are connected with NMSU. And we've had some presenters come as well. But there's always a balance there, of trying to keep the pollinators healthy, but also all the parasites and pests off of of other types that are.
Do you think the problem is just how the industry is? Because I mean, having these huge commercial farms that go on for like sometimes miles, and no other vegetation around, that could have an impact.
It might. I'm of the opinion that some of the pollination contract health issues that we talked about earlier is partly due to limited nutrition for the bees. So if you stick them in an almond orchard that goes on, as you said, forever and ever and ever, they're only getting one nutrient. So like that, an analogy might be the guy that ate McDonald's every day for 60 days or whatever. That's all he's getting. And it adversely affected his health, so that would do that for the bees. And it could be that we need to sharpen, but a lot of commercial agriculture doesn't depend on bees. So like you were talking about tomatoes and things like that in your garden, most modern varieties of tomatoes are not bee pollinated. They're wind pollinated. Most corn is wind pollinated. Pecan trees, big deal here in the valley area here, are also not bee pollinated. However, the other pesticides that they use around them could adversely affect the bees that are in the area. So, yeah.
And I mean, I know you know that we're going through one of the craziest droughts we've had in a long time. Does that affect their growth or their population?
It does. So bees here in El Paso, of course, everybody's switching to refrigerated air now.
Yeah.
But for decades and decades and decades or whatever, it's been evaporative cooling, and that's really what bees use. They consume a lot of water, but much of the water they consume is actually an evaporative cooling effect on their brood, because when it's 105 outside in June, they have to keep their babies about 95 degrees. So They go and haul water. We get a lot of calls from people who have swimming pools, and the bees are all over their swimming pool, and they think they have a colony, and it's just the bees hauling water back.
Right.
So water definitely is an issue for bees. They need it.
And the chlorinated water doesn't have like a problem with the bees?
It doesn't seem to, because you would think that they would ignore it if it was bad for them. But mainly what bees try to stay away from is deep water and rushing water, because they'll die. They get swept away. So if you have us particularly like a leaky faucet that's dripping, they love that because it's just a constant, steady little drip, and they can take a little bit off of it. But they don't seem to mind dirty water, chlorinated water, any kind of. It's just water. That's what they're looking for.
And bees can be pretty feisty, right? I mean,
they can.
And also, what's up with the hummingbirds that kill the bees?
I haven't heard of hummingbirds killing bees. I have heard of bees driving off hummingbirds from hummingbird feeders.
Oh, wow.
A lot of people get really upset at bees for drinking out the sugar water out of the feeders. But bees, actually about 3 years ago, I did have to go to the emergency room because I ran into a colony up in Anthony that I took about 75 stings. So that was bad.
Man, they're really aggressive.
Yeah, they were extremely aggressive. They chased my truck for another mile away from the location. So, those are ones. That's why we do tell people, give us a call, because even with our equipment and our knowledge, sometimes the bees win. So
yeah. And talking about how feisty, I heard in a podcast that there was this guy that cultivated bees. And I guess the bees that were there was another crew of bees that came in, and that they just talked it out, like they were gonna fight or something, but that the owner was like, let's just leave them alone, let's get out of their way, and that after a while the other crew left, and then the bees just went back to their. Do they ever fight like that?
They do. Yeah. In fact, I have never heard of bees being quite that nice, actually, when that happens. But they do try to steal from each other all the time. We call them robbers. And sometimes the feral colony will come in and actually just take over the resources of another colony. They'll just basically subjugate them or kill them. And so their aggression isn't just towards people or predators, sometimes towards each other, but that's just kind of the circle of life when it comes to bees. I mean, the ones they can't do that to a healthy hive that's reproducing rapidly and is dealing with its parasites well isn't susceptible to that, but sometimes a stronger colony will take over a weaker one.
And are there any like local wasp or hornets that steal from bees in the area?
So here's the weird thing, is that bees are actually wasps, and a friend of mine refers to them as the only vegan wasps, because most wasps are carnivorous. So what we do have, we find yellow jackets stealing larvae and actually eating the baby bees out of the colony. And so there is some predation that takes place. Normally people that have honeybees do get wasps around because of a variety of reasons, but essentially they're looking to eat bees.
Oh man! Yeah. And are you scared of those killer hornets?
The murder hornet, man. Yeah. Well, so yeah, I don't want to run into any murder hornets, as they call them, the giant Japanese wasp. They haven't made it to the desert, and hopefully they won't. One of the dynamics that we observe with Africanization is that they don't like cold weather. So like, they're experiencing a little bit of it in Albuquerque, but further north in Albuquerque, they don't have Africanized bees. Yeah. And what I'm hoping is that if those propagate up in the Pacific Northwest, that they just can't handle the desert. And they're not going to come down where it's hot. They just can't tolerate heat.
Yeah, hopefully not, man.
The way the Japanese bees deal with them actually is they don't sting the murder hornet or whatever, that giant hornet. They actually just ball them up and use their body heat to kill them when they're it's a reasonable theory.
Hell yeah, that is
that they might not make it in the 105-degree dryness of the desert, through the June.
Yeah, they seem like they need a little moisture and a little coolness.
Yeah.
So how do you keep the bees that you bring down from, or that you remove from places like that? Don't they just scatter around and leave?
They don't, and they may try to make your life miserable for a little while at first. And that's why I don't often have a lot of people join the club and they want to observe, but frequently they want to observe once, and they don't, because it's a little bit nerve-wracking. But the process is fairly simple. We usually have to cut a hole into a wall, and we do have pictures available on the Facebook page for Canutillo Bee Ranch and on our website. But and so once we get past that initial opening, we usually begin by using a pretty special vacuum. We call it a bee vacuum, and we start removing bees bodily from the comb. And very gently, we'll cut the comb out and trim it to fit our frames. And we use rubber bands to secure it in the frame, and start putting that in a box. And so as we go, we just have to go step by step. And we're looking for the queen. Hopefully we cage her individually so she stays safe. But the bees are real focused on their babies. I mean, you can understand that from a human perspective. It's all about family, and for bees, it's all about family too. They're going to stay with those babies and make sure that they stay good. So that helps us. We utilize that. Yeah.
Right. So when you say the queen, so all of them are males, but just one.
Actually, the vast majority of them are females.
Okay.
Yeah, the vast majority of them are females. There are what we call drones, and drones are very, very obvious. They have no stinger. Which is an odd thing, and they have really big eyeballs in a slightly different shape. But the worker bees are all females,
Okay.
and they're unfertilized females. Essentially, the only actively laying female in the hive is the queen, and she has a very large abdomen and normally is not striped. So if with a little practice, you can usually find her.
And they all work to provide honey for her, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the queen, they actually make the queen out of a young egg. If they decide they need a new queen, they start to feed her a special diet that develops her into a queen. And when you can even see, it's called a queen cell. It looks like a peanut hanging off of the comb.
Right.
When we open up a hive, so we know exactly that's what's going on there. And yeah, the colony essentially supports itself. I mean, there are nurse bees that's all they do is they raise the babies. There's an entourage for the queen because she is cleaned constantly and fed constantly, and every need that she has is met. Her main job is to lay eggs all day long, every day.
Right.
And so they make sure that she can do that.
Right. And they do that to guarantee their genes, right? Like some type of...
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And then make sure the colony is healthy.
Oh, my bad.
Oh, it's okay.
Once the queen dies, though, does the colony just collapse, or do they form and get a new queen?
It is. They'll make a new queen in the natural habitat. So what they do, and sometimes they decide to do this before she dies. But if she dies, they'll take one of her eggs that is less than 3 days old and begin to feed that egg the special diet to turn that female egg into a queen. And the way they know how to do that, because it's weird, they all know where the queen is and how healthy she is by what's called the mandibular pheromone. So right in the jawline, essentially, of the bee, she gives off a chemical that says, hey guys, I'm here, I'm healthy, I'm happy, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And when she dies, that stops. And so the colony immediately then begins to make a new queen.
So different than our world, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
So crazy how they guarantee their genes, you know, to continue on. It's very different from ours.
Yeah. Well, they're a super organism. So in a sense, they're working as individuals, but that each colony is really analogous to an animal itself, corporately. So,
right.
Yeah.
And do they have a form of? Nah, probably not, huh? Like communicating with each other from far away, or do they have to be really close together to?
I don't know. Okay. If they do, I haven't heard of that. Normally, they do have a tremendous ability to direct themselves back to their colony without confusion. But the only communication in between bees that I've seen is the dance that we've talked about, and pheromones guide them as well. So.
Right. Yeah, and I heard when they said about that dance that those directions were really precise too.
They are. Yeah. They really can get you right in the spot. Yeah.
Damn. That's crazy, man. That's crazy how, we think of animals as, basically just mindless things, but I don't know. It looks like they're pretty intelligent,
Yeah, I would agree. Bees are very, very intelligent.
And you can tell they have, humors, and I'm sure they get angry, they're happy, they're comfortable, they're not comfortable. It's just, I don't know. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, yeah, and I mean, have you ever seen anything that you say they're a superorganism? Have you ever seen anything that would make them, I guess, super that humans don't really understand?
I there's a lot of things about bees that we don't understand. Why they might decide to replace their queen is something that we don't understand. We don't understand why they choose certain locations over others to establish a new colony. We don't understand, like you said, we don't understand fully their temperaments, things like that. Yeah.
And do they migrate, or they're very localized?
They do migrate. In fact, so when they swarm, which is a reproductive activity, so about half the colony will leave with half the honey and the old queen, and they go off to start a new colony. When they do that, they have a certain distance normally that they'll try to establish, because they range about 3 to 5 miles. So they'll try not to overlap their territory too much when they set off a new colony, in order that they would have plenty of resources,
Damn.
But eventually they do migrate. As we talk about, the ones that we have here in El Paso are influenced by migratory bees that came up from Brazil over a number of years. So
Right.
It's just a continuous interloping between bees. And,
yeah, they came up here. So
and then, well, I've heard another weird thing that's like a little off topic, but I know you do removals, but I don't know if you saw the video online of this one lady in Austin that does removals without any suit on at all. Do you think that's real, or do you think?
Well, it seems to be real. I will caution you that there are times where I can do a removal without any gear on. But I would suspect that she's not able to do that on every removal that she does. And the videos that we're seeing are very selective. Because I can do that. I mean, within a couple minutes, I can assess whether a colony is going to be extremely gentle or not. But I would not recommend anybody. I mean, the danger of those kinds of videos is that somebody who doesn't know what they're doing thinks that there's nothing to it, and all you got to do is cut a hole and you can get bees out of there. Some people live in mortal fear of bees and would never think about doing that, but other people should be a little more respectful of the potential dangers of feral bees.
Yeah, I don't ever mess with them, man. I try to just leave them.
Yeah, well, the difference.
Respectful. I've always thought of that.
Yeah, one of the differences between a straight European colony and an Africanized or African colony is the number of bees that they will send out to defend themselves. So generally speaking, a European honeybee colony, if it really gets agitated and really needs to drive off a predator, will send out about 20% of the bees. An Africanized or hybridized colony will send out 80% of the colony. So if you make a mistake, it's very hard to correct it. You know what I mean? If you come across bees that are agitated and you're not suited up, it doesn't take very long to get a very dangerous dose of venom.
And even if you're suited up and they start swarming, is it best just to start leaving, just to get out of there? Or?
Well, so some people will. When I'm doing a removal, I've signed a contract that says I'll get these bees out of here. But at times I have left with tens of thousands of stingers in every part of my suit. Damn. And so it's you can choose sometimes to do that, but I don't really. I have agreed not to choose that when I do a removal. Yeah.
And is it easy to, like, can they kill you easily, or is it just painful?
People can die. One thing, I run into a lot of people that have never been stung by a bee. My grandfather was a beekeeper, so I never could say that. I had gotten stung by a bee, but if you've never been stung by a bee, and you're not going to have an allergy to it, the way allergies work. If you may have one the second time or the third time, so you shouldn't fear that. But it is possible for aggressive bees to cause you to go into anaphylaxis frequently and die from it, simply because your throat constricts and things like that. So it is important that we not overemphasize the general nature of bees, that is, generally speaking, that they are not aggressive, because there are the exceptions, but the exceptions can be catastrophic to an individual. So
definitely, man. Yeah, well, do you have any more questions, Luis, or anything else to ask?
Man, I can't.
Yeah, it's been very informative and interesting
Is there
conversation,
anything you
man.
could tell us more about bees that we don't know about, man?
Oh, well,
Or about what you do, like your the bee catching or whatever?
yeah, well, I mean, the important thing that people ought to understand is the process of bee removal. I probably should put this plug in, and that is that what we do for bee removal, live removal, relocation, sometimes appears a lot more destructive because sometimes we have to cut a wall open or we have to cut a soffit open.
Right.
But it normally costs less than having an extermination done professionally, and an extermination, you're very, very likely to have a reinfestation of bees because they leave all the comb and the honey and the pollen up there. And there's a time and a place for that, but generally speaking, it's just a superior option. So if you have a need to have bees, and likely in El Paso there are just bees everywhere, so you may run into somebody at least that needs bees removed. Certainly go to pdnbeekeepers.org, and we have a contact form there. And that goes to me and a couple other people that can help people out. And that way we can not only remove the bees alive, but we are able to make sure that you don't get bees again in that same location, which is what happens frequently with other options. So.
And what happens when you guys have to cut a hole in the wall? Does the insurance just come in and fix that?
Occasionally, insurance will cover it. They normally don't cover the cost of the bee removal, which is usually for a structural removal several $100s.
Right.
Is what we charge for it. It costs several $100s for the equipment to put a bee colony in. So we're really not rolling in it. It just costs money to do this. Right. But often it's left to the homeowner to make the repairs. One of the oddities in Texas is that when a beekeeper does a structural removal, he's prohibited by the law from actually repairing what he does. It's because back in the day we weren't even allowed to do them. We weren't allowed to do structural removals. And so they changed the law about 10 or 12 years ago, but with that caveat that even if you're a handy guy, you can't fix what you have cut open there. So
right. And why was it illegal to do those type of extractions?
Well, it was generally to protect the consumer. Was the idea was that a lot of beekeepers would be a little bit overly aggressive, I think, in removing structure of a building or whatever, and then leave it falling down or whatever. That was the idea. But the reality is that ultimately, I think that people were probably kind of winking at the law anyway and doing it, and there wasn't a problem. So they just made the caveat. Right. And it makes sense. I mean, there's no license for bee removers. There's no professional association. We learn it's kind of a guild. We have our club, and we learn from people who've been beekeeping longer than we've been alive. And so we learn how to handle the bees, and we do that. But we're not contractors. I mean, we're not concrete contractors. We don't do block. We don't do stucco. We're not those things. And so the regulations should apply, because we're not remodelers. So. And
one more question.
Sure.
Man. I'm sure it varies a lot, but average, what might be a cost of a bee removal if someone has, not too much of a problem, just I guess.
Yeah, so one of the common locations, so for like a swarm that's hanging on a tree or on a wall, usually we just charge for like travel, so it's about $50.
Okay.
And that's the best time to get them, because that's before they move into somebody's wall.
Right.
They're just bees. There's no comb, there's no honey, there's no wax. Another common location would be like a sprinkler control box. I don't know if you've seen the little green boxes in people's yard that have the valve. Bees love those here. And about $100 to $125 to remove those. And then, but if I have to climb a ladder 20 feet up and cut a big hole out of the wall, usually 250 to 300,
Yeah, the more dangerous.
I got to pay for my insurance, and I do have insurance. There's costs associated with that, but but that's quite a bit of work. I mean, we're talking 100-degree heat with the bee suit on and a few hours with a helper and that. So it doesn't seem excessive, and most people want to see the bees live.
Yeah. And let me ask you, man, what kind of advice or what would you tell someone, like a young person that would like to start up a honey business, locally and be
Yeah.
good for the community. And I mean, because we want a lot of honeybees. So I mean,
Sure.
what kind of advice would you tell them?
Well-
How would you tell them to start?
Yeah, if they have no bee experience at all and they just had a dream one night
Yeah.
and they wanted to just decided to have bees the next day, the first thing they ought to do is go to a beekeeper association meeting. And we have monthly meetings at the Paseo del Norte Beekeepers Association. They're going on by Zoom right now. But just start learning, because the learning curve is very steep. And it would be sad if somebody went out and bought 50 beehives and 50 colonies of bees and 49 of them left the next day because they didn't know what they were doing. Right. And expensive. So they want to learn about the bees in a graduated way. So where they may have one or two at first and learn how the bees operate and how to do an inspection and how to assess their health. Yeah.
So how do those meetings go? Is it like a lecture, or is it people asking questions, interactions, or?
Yeah, it's all of that. Normally we try to have a presentation from an expert in an area. Yesterday we had our monthly meeting for May, and we had a beekeeper from Albuquerque talk to us about mite control, mite testing. Right. Very important thing. And then we discuss problems that we're having with our own hives, or potential problems that we're trying to avoid, or just questions about that. So it's all of the above.
Okay, and then what should they do after that? Just go from there, and then they would get it?
Yeah. You can start growing your hives. You'll need to find a safe place with plenty of food and some water to do that.
Can you do it in city limits, or you have to be out?
You can have bees in the city limits. I would recommend making sure you kept some nice bees in the city limits, because the average city lot in El Paso is not big. Right. But you probably would not keep enough bees to have a viable honey business.
Oh, okay. Right.
On a city lot. So but you could have an agreement with a farmer or a rancher somewhere that wanted the benefit of the bees out on their property. A friend of ours out in Vado has a lot of space.
So that's something people do?
Yeah. So you would have to, I would advise having a written agreement, so you make sure that you have access to the property when you need to and all that. And you obviously people need to trust each other, about what their intentions are and all that. But as long as you can do that, you don't have to keep bees in your backyard. I mean, people do that.
Right.
That'd be viable.
And have you heard of any business that does both, that farms anything and then also does honey, so they could? Or you haven't heard that? No.
Well, normally, so if a commercial beekeeper that has 50 hives, that's a full-time job. Yeah. So they're not growing, chili pepper or anything else. They're not growing anything. They're just doing the bees and that. But right. I do have a friend who has a small organic pecan orchard out in La Union. That he's also a beekeeper. He has about 10 or 12 hives. But the bees are a hobby. That's not big enough to be a commercial operation. Yeah.
Right. Are people buying more local honey here in El Paso, or is it still a business that's kind of
I could sell every ounce that I can produce. Yeah. The farmers markets and Ardavinos and a couple other different places.
And what do you know about that Favens honey? Is that like the Favens? Is that authentic? Do you know about it?
Well, I mean, it's authentic. It's real honey. I'm not sure that they sell raw. I don't know. But I think that I don't know that they sell raw honey. It is local honey.
Well, how do you know when it's raw? Like, again.
Well, that's a legal definition. So, like, say you go to Popeye. You guys like fried chicken? You go to Popeye's Fried Chicken, and they give you a packet, and they may even call it honey, but it says honey sauce on it. Right. Because it's mostly corn syrup and has a little honey in it for flavor. So they can't call it honey. They can't call it raw honey if it's been heated over 115 degrees. Mm-hmm. And that's a legal regulation. So it can't be on their label. So often you'll have a local honey. But if it says raw honey, you should have a pretty good confidence that it's raw.
Oh, okay.
So if raw is better, why aren't people selling more raw?
It's kind of a pain. It crystallizes much faster. Okay. So I don't know if you've ever had honey do that, where it becomes kind of solid.
Yeah, real thick.
Yeah, I'm happy when that happens, because then I know I have real honey, and raw honey. But commercially they heat it. Partly it's pasteurization to make sure there are no microorganisms, which is not really a real problem. Honey, like you can store meat in honey, raw meat. If you pour honey on it, raw meat is basically stored permanently. But basically so that it flows into the containers and out of the containers easier, because the consumer likes liquid honey to go on the biscuit. That's what they like. Or on the sopapillas, like at Avila's or whatever, they want to fill up the thing with honey,
Right.
Hard to do.
Heated up honey cheaper than raw honey?
It generally is, and basically it's just the manufacturing and packaging cost that is cheaper. Yeah.
Damn.
So like even if you go to there's a grocery store here in town that does sell honey, and you can fill up your own jar, and if you look at the container, it's sitting on a heating pad to keep it at an easy flow temperature. So they just warm it up for that reason.
So I know you said you right now, but does your company still have something they could sell? Or?
No, we don't. Well, I mean, my company is Canutillo Bee Ranch, and there may be somebody in the association that has some, but it's been a rough year so far.
Right.
So I don't know of anybody that's harvested honey yet this spring. But I do, like I said, I have a little bit of comb honey available, but that's about it right now.
And is that healthy too, though?
Oh yeah, it's very, very healthy. It's
you said that's the one with the wax. That's
yeah,
wax,
yeah.
right?
So I usually spread that on a really hot piece of toast, so it kind of melts in there, But that's the way I like it.
That sounds kind of good, actually.
Yeah, it is good.
You have enough to sell, or just for yourself?
I have a little bit of that available for sale, maybe.
I want to try some.
Yeah, I'm gonna try some with comb.
It's good. Yeah,
yeah.
We'll get you some.
So I know you already mentioned where people could find you guys, but I mean, anything else? Any more information you want to give us? Maybe more websites or?
Well, our club, it's probably best to go to pdnbeekeepers.org, which is our association, and it has a lot of information there to connect with us. So if they want to buy honey, or they have a bee problem that they need to get bees out of their shed or out from under there, we get them in barbecue grills and all sorts of things.
Right.
If they have that problem, but that's really the best way to get in contact with us.
And if anyone wants to go out and help you guys, can they go out and intern for you guys, or volunteer, or whatever it's called?
I generally welcome people that have come to a club meeting or two. If they'll need a bee suit and gloves and all of that, because I make sure everybody stays. But I do generally welcome people coming on swarm removals, especially, and cutouts.
And how much would one of those suits cost, man?
Well, you can buy them on eBay for uber cheap, or you can be safe. And you don't want the best bee suits that we use, because I use them 10 or 12 times a week.
Right.
Are in the $250 range, probably about in the $100 range, $75 to $100 range. You could get a jacket, and then you need some gloves also, and you may want to get some rubber bands to put around your pant legs, that kind of thing. If you just get a jacket.
And how long would a suit like that last you?
It could last a long, long time if you're not using it 10 or 12 times a week. It could last years.
So you use it 10 or 12 times a week. How long does it usually last you?
I usually plan on a couple seasons.
Okay.
So I have to factor in a new suit. And part of that is just because when I do a cutout, I'm reaching into a stucco wall or a tree stump or whatever, it just gets snagged and torn up. And you want to make sure that it's functional.
Right. So there you go. So you encourage volunteers to come and help out and learn about the bees, because, I mean, they're what keeps us eating, That's
right.
And they're fascinating too. They're just such a unique organism.
Yeah, they are unique. I mean, I keep other livestock. We have chickens and pigs and goats, and the bees are probably far the most fascinating. They really are. Yeah.
Do your bees go and mess with your other animals?
The animals, they can sometimes. Not normally, but yeah. Occasionally, when they're being grumpy, you'll see the goats get a little irritated. But yeah.
And do you live around where your bees are at, or you live far from them?
I do. No, I have a small piece of property in Canutillo, and we
right.
keep them there.
And they don't go all over your house and sting your family and whatnot?
Not usually.
Nah.
Not usually.
So just stay in their little hive or
They
whatever?
normally are about their own business and normally do their own thing. You know, occasionally, because I bring feral bees home, occasionally we do have a little bit of an issue. But most of my family has a bee suit. You know, and so we'll relocate them further away if that's what we have to do. But the way this is more technical, but there's two ways that you develop a bee allergy, and one of the ways is being around bee goop, like a bee suit.
Right.
Can cause your body to develop an allergy, and the way to prevent that is to get stung every once in a while. So I just, you know, I tell my kids, I'm like, hey man, I'm just making sure you're healthy. Getting a bee sting every once in a while.
Just stick your hand near the hive real quick.
You know, and that's a thing. I mean, that's a medical reality. Apitherapy is good for a lot of things, arthritis and things like that, and that's actually bee stings. And my grandparents used to sit there at the dining table and intentionally have bees sting their hands so that they would be treated for their arthritis.
So is this scientific, or is this culturally what people think?
There is definitely scientific basis to think that bee venom has a lot of health benefits. In fact, you know, we're still dealing with the tail end of this pandemic thing here going on.
Right.
And there was an observation made. It's not a full study. They requested a study because they're observing that the beekeepers in Wuhan, China didn't get coronavirus.
Wow.
And nobody else, though none of the apotherapists and none of the apitherapy patients got coronavirus. So no one wants to say actually that bee venom prevents coronavirus, but it's an odd observation, isn't it?
It's not a correlation.
Yeah, there's an interesting correlation, so they need to now study that. So yeah.
What else do you know it cures for sure?
Well, mainly I know about arthritis, and they say that it has some potential to treat the symptoms of various autoimmune disorders also.
Right.
But you know, this is not medical advice.
Right.
I'm not a doctor. I am not a doctor, and this is not legal advice, nor is it financial advice. All of those,
allegedly.
all disclaimers, all standard disclaimers apply, but those observations have been made.
Yeah. Damn. But would you recommend that? I mean, you say they die once they sting someone.
Well, normally what apotherapists do is they take bees that are within several days of the end of their life cycle in order to do that. So, you know, and it doesn't take many.
How do you know they're at the end of their life cycle? Do they
change color? No, they don't. But we do know, and as the life cycle progresses in a bee, once they hatch, they normally during the season they live about 6 weeks, and it's about the 6th week that they graduate to becoming the foragers. So people are confused by this because they watch the Bee movie. Did you see the Bee movie with Jerry Seinfeld?
Yeah.
They were this aspect of it was totally wrong in that the bee was supposed to pick his job for life. That's not the way it works. All bees go through this progression. You know, they're nurse bees first because they can't fly very well. But as they get older and their muscles develop, then they become foragers. But that's the last week of their life. And so apotherapists often, at least my grandfather would do this anyway, would grab the bees that were coming back into the colony because he knew that they were near the end of their life cycle rather than the nurse bees that are inside.
Right. One more question, man.
Sure.
I don't know if you know, man, but what's the whole process of honey making? Like, how do they make the honey?
Yeah, so honey is very simple. It is dehydrated nectar. And so the bees have two stomachs. They have a honey sac stomach, and they go and they suck the nectar out of the flowers. And then essentially they deposit it in a little cell in the honeycomb. And then there are bees that are there that literally just flap their wings across that comb, creating airflow, and they dehydrate it to about 17 or 18% by volume water. And then they cap it. And so then generally speaking, as beekeepers, when we see honey in a comb that's capped, we say, okay, well that's honey that's ready to go. And so one bee makes 1/12 of 1 teaspoon of honey in its whole life. is all it makes.
That's
So
all?
yeah, so that's why they need so many of them to produce extra. And so it's a valuable commodity. Some people end up throwing crystallized honey out because they think it went bad, and you're throwing out like thousands of bees' lifetimes worth of work there if you do that. So just warm that honey up, man. Don't throw it out.
But it's because it just looks like it's residue.
It doesn't look good, but just heat it up gently. If you have a sous vide machine, the thing that circulates do y'all know what that is? It's a type of cooking machine. It circulates very low temperature water.
Okay.
That's perfect because you can set it for 113 degrees and just warm your honey up for a long time without cooking it. And so that's a great thing.
Just melts back in.
Yeah. So, but the honey is really just dehydrated nectar.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember my mom had one of those. Like they gave her a big tin of honey, and then at the end it was just a whole bunch of crystallized stuff, and she just threw it away.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't know.
It's edible. In fact, in down where I'm from originally, near San Antonio, there's a place called Fredericksburg, and they sell crystallized honey. They call it creamed honey. It's not creamed. It's just a little more solid, and it's kind of nice. It hangs on your biscuit a little better.
Right.
But,
It melts a little better.
Yeah.
It just kind of looks more threatening, like more dangerous. Like it's just sugar there.
Yeah, it's not dangerous.
You're gonna get diabetes just from eating that.
Aye.
Yeah. Well, so think about that. So diabetics would have to be careful consuming honey.
Right.
But honey does, especially raw honey, does metabolize somewhat differently than like just straight sugar, straight corn syrup.
Right.
But certainly like a pasteurized honey that's been super filtered and has no benefit at all health-wise really other than raising your blood sugar. So you wouldn't want to do that. But again, this is not medical advice.
Right.
But it is a healthy sweetening option.
It is, man. You know what? I'm trying to leave sugar for forever, but there's times that I don't drink sugar at all day. I'll drink like chamomile with honey and lime. And I notice at the end of the day, my teeth are still clean.
Yeah.
Like really clean.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? Like if I just brushed them or something.
Oh, really? Huh. Well,
I won't eat nothing of sugar, and they'll
Yeah.
feel like really, really smooth, man. I think that sugar makes your your mouth dirty or something.
It does acidify your mouth, I think, overall.
Yeah, and then all the bacteria you feed on that sugar, so then they grow and get that plaque on your teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to avoid it. But if of the sweetening options that are out there, it's one of the more whole food options, that has more benefit to it than just refined anything.
And people have been using it for thousands of years. Do you think since the beginning of agriculture that's been used, or
people have been keeping bees for a long time? Way back in the book of Samuel in the Bible, as y'all know, full time I'm a pastor at El Paso Bible Church. It mentions that the son of Saul ate a little piece of honeycomb and his eyes brightened. So they've known about the nutritional benefits of honey for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
It would be hard to identify how long they've cultivated bees, but we know that the ancient Near East was doing it already.
Right. And do you know of any other healthy sweeteners, or just honey?
I don't know. Stevia is an option, things like that. It's a plant that's extremely sweet, but some people have trouble with bitterness as an aftertaste, things like that. But I don't really keep up with too many because if I want a sweetener that's not refined sugar, I have honey. So yeah.
And do you drink a lot of sugar, man?
I do not, but I do have a piece of toast with raw honey on it pretty frequently. Yeah. I've had to, in my 40s, I've had to give up all the sugary sweet drinks. Yeah, I was a Coca-Cola fiend for many years. But
and have you noticed that you love these things and then you stop eating them for a while and then you try it?
Can't stand them. Can't even do it anymore. You're like, why did I drink gallons of this a day? Yeah. No.
Yeah, that's how I used to love Krispy Kreme donuts, and I stopped with the whole sugar thing.
Yeah.
I could barely eat half of one before my
almost the smell is too much. Yeah.
Yeah, it's man, sugar, it's just like a drug, the more you eat, the more you're gonna need.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah, man.
Well, man, we want to go ahead and thank you for coming over and having a chat with us. It was real interesting, man.
Thanks for having us.
Chat, man.
Yeah,
I liked it. It's one of the ones I've actually,
It is. It's interesting. That's I tell people I get bored easily, and so this is a hobby that I don't get bored of because there's always something new.
Something
to
new.
learn.
It's
Learn
not
something
repetitive.
Yep. So it's been great. But thanks for having me. I appreciate
Thanks,
it.
like I
Enjoyed
said,
the time.
thanks for coming. And y'all, if y'all want to buy honey or y'all want to help out or y'all want to learn more, go ahead and reach out to the website and the information he gave out. What was it again, Matt?
It's www.pdnbeekeepers.org is the website for the Paseo del Norte Beekeepers Association.
And is that the best way to contact you, or
That's the best
phone
way
number?
for education and for what
All right.
I don't have the phone number on
All
it.
right,
In
cool.
fact, we don't have an office
All right.
because we're an
all right. I thought you had
association.
an office.
I wish maybe one day. But
Hey.
we are a cyber organization in terms of that part of it.
Right.
And of course, you can look us up, Canutillo Bee Ranch, on Facebook and the web as well, and that'll get to me directly.
And if someone wants to start growing and not want to go in with their own business yet, can they become like workers with y'all or partners with y'all?
Oh,
or?
certainly. Yeah, in fact, I should have talked about this too. I don't know if you know about the Mustard Seed Cafe over off of, is it off of Sunset? It's off of Sunset. It's a West Side Community Church. And they have a master gardener there. And so they have a garden that grows the vegetables, many of them that they serve at the Mustard Seed Cafe.
Oh, nice.
And we've just gotten permission to start a community apiary, community bee yard there. We'll have both native pollinators and a couple of beehives so we can do education and exposure for people that may not be willing to, they don't want to take the plunge, they don't want to spend the money, but they want to learn. So we'll have that opportunity in the future.
Oh man, that's cool.
Y'all gonna post that on the website, right?
Yeah, we'll definitely have that available.
Well, there y'all go. People keep looking out, man. We need to care more about our bees and everything in general, man. All our wildlife and brothers and sisters that are not humans.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
We need to take care of the environment for ourselves and for our kids. Yeah,
Exactly.
certainly.
We're
Yep.
causing a lot of harm. This guy just had a conversation with the zoo.
Yeah, with Rick. I don't know if you know Rick Lobello, the conservationist at the zoo.
I don't. I've done some bee work out at the zoo for Dr. Milne out there, but I don't know him.
Yeah. Well, he's
Yeah.
trying to save the wolves or something, right? 'Cause,
Yeah, well, he's trying to bring wolves back to the Chihuahuan Desert back in Big Bend
Yeah.
to help with the ecosystem and just
Sure.
to make them a better, ecosystem.
Well,
And
predators definitely have their place in the ecosystem, so you got to have them.
Yeah, it's all balance. It's all
Yeah.
balance, man.
Yep.
All right, well, thank you, once again, for
All
coming
right.
through, man. It's been very interesting, and we hope that you're successful in your future endeavors.
Yeah,
man.
appreciate that. Thank you again, guys.
Thank you.
We'll see you.
Have a good one.
thank you.